The following is an encore presentation of U.S. Modernist Radio, underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Hi, my name is Aidan Anderson of the Local Project, and you're listening to US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio. Join George Smart and Frank King as they talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today, U.S. Modernist Radio welcomes award-winning architect Frank Harmon and author Lisa Germany Ziegler talking about the life and legacy of Harwell Hamilton Harris. And now, the host that Donald Trump has never fired, George Smart and Frank King.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome to the show. Architect Harwell Hamilton Harris never quite reached the celebrity status of his peers, such as Richard Neutra and Frank Lloyd Wright. Yet his quieter career work stands as some of the most brilliant of the 20th century. Practicing primarily in California, Texas, and North Carolina, his achievements in residential, commercial, and academic settings earned national admiration and awards, including the Richard Neutra Medal, fellowship in the National AIA, and an honorary doctorate from North Carolina State University. With us today is his close friend and executor of his estate, Frank Harmon. Frank Harmon was educated at NC State School of Design and at the Architectural Association in London. After working with McMinn, Norfleet, and Wicker of Greensboro, Richard Meyer in New York, and his own Harmon and Similoff in London, he founded Frank Harmon Architect in 1985. The National AIA-ranked firm has won more than 40 design awards, and Harmon has received the 2013 F. Carter Williams Gold Medal, as well as fellowship in the National AIA. Architect Jeffrey Lee writes, "Across the architectural profession, Frank Harmon is the face of North Carolina architecture. Through his words, deeds, and the work of his firm, he has brought a national audience a glimpse of the unique character and cultural architecture of his home state." Online, Frank's wildly popular column Native Places shares observations on what are fast becoming the lost arts of drawing and writing. He's been featured on American Public Radio and is a much sought-after speaker and design competition juror across the world. He teaches at NC State. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you.
We also have author Lisa Germany Ziegler, who has written on architecture since the early 1980s, contributing to publications such as Architectural Record, Harvard Design Magazine, and Progressive Architecture. Her beautiful and detailed 1991 book on Harwell Hamilton Harris traced the development of Harris's life and career and his honored place in American modernism. Her most recent book is Houses of the Sundown Sea, the Architectural Vision of Harry Gesner, and she joins us from Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello.
So, Lisa, you wrote this book and you were doing the research for it in the late 80s and early 90s. How did you come across Harwell Hamilton Harris, and how did you decide to write about him?
Well, the University of Texas was going to acquire all of his drawings, and one of his former students and someone with whom he associated briefly, David Barrow, had purchased them and made them a donation to the university's architectural drawing collection. And so they wanted to celebrate that, and they asked me to curate a show of his work and invited a small catalog to go with it. And I flew out to visit with Mr. Harris. He still had the drawings at that time, and I suddenly realized that what they wanted, they wanted a brochure to guide you through this show, and his career was just so rich, and so, it so much traced the history of the modern movement that I thought, I can't do that. So I wrote a much more fleshed out catalog of the show, and various people saw that later, and the University of Texas Press asked me to write a real full-blown monograph on Harris. And at that point, Mr. Harris trusted me because he liked the catalog, and so I could ask him questions that I didn't dare ask him when I was writing just the catalog, and I was just a young girl, and I think he thought, oh no. What can she possibly say about me, and why can't I have some more formidable historian? But he was very pleased with the catalog, and the book was much richer for that.
How did Harwell Harris come into architecture? I mean, it certainly was a very exciting time during the 20s and 30s, particularly in L.A. The city was taking shape. Silent movies were turning into talkie films. The whole place was just exploding. So what was it like for him coming into design at that point?
Well, I think he was a little lost for a while. He had some bad health as a young adult, and then he went to the Otis School, art school, and then he dropped out, and then he decided to go back. And when he went back, he was just, I think, kind of blown away by all the new ideas that were happening, and how his father had been an architect, but he never really thought of his father as an architect, even though his houses and buildings are really revered. And not until he saw modernism did he really understand what architecture could be. So then he saw Frank Lloyd Wright's Barnesville house, and that was really the beginning. I mean, he really realized that architecture could be like sculpture, which he'd been studying. It could be kind of like carved out of space, and it could follow the movements of a body through it. It was organic, and so then he became quite enthralled with architecture.
Well, Frank Harmon, can you describe for us what it was like in the beginnings of modernist architecture in California, about that same kind of excitement that Harwell felt spread through really the whole state and country and started to move our way?
The beginnings of modernism in California really started in the 19th century. People like Charles and Henry Green and Bernard Maybeck and others had developed an indigenous Californian style that was based on the climate and the materials, the place of California, its beautiful sky, and its largely arid landscape. And they developed an architecture that responded to that, but also to a more relaxed and informal style of living in California. And he often likes to say that's really where his architecture came from, this indigenous response to a place and the people who lived there. And so he also thought it was fairly natural that when early modernists such as Richard Neutra and Rudolf Schindler, both of whom he admired, moved to California, there was, in a sense, a welcome for them that modernists had not found on the East Coast. At the time, people like Gropius and Marcel Breuer and others felt like they had to fight a battle to have their modern designs accepted. Whereas in California, Schindler and Neutra and, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright were much more readily accepted.
That was a function of the entertainment industry growing out there, or just the California lifestyle?
No, it's a more relaxed way of life. People didn't wear ties there. The outdoors was as important as the indoors. Even then, when you looked to buy a house, you looked more carefully at the outdoors than the indoors because the climate was such that's where you were going to live. And so people were open to an architecture that was largely window and where the inside merged easily with the outside. And those, of course, were tenets of modernism. Maybe the movie industry had something to do with it. Lisa can speak better than I to that.
I don't really think it did. I mean, I think there were movie stars who admired modern architecture and commissioned modern architecture. But, for instance, Harwell had a commission from John Huston, which never came to anything, and one from Robert Ryan. But the war got in the way, and in fact, he had a commission from Arnold Schoenberg, a great composer, and it ended as a very direct result of World War II intervening. But otherwise, I don't think Mr. Harris was, I think John Huston to him would have been just like, just an ordinary citizen. I mean, I think he was thinking about how can I work through this program. I mean, I think he immediately started thinking about architecture and was not sort of dazzled.
I got an email recently from an author writing about cartoonists in the early days of Disney and the cartoon studios. And evidently, Harwell Harris had a number of cartoonist clients.
That's true. And I received a box, I think Frank sent it to me, of letters and postcards and Christmas cards that Harris has received. And among them, there are so many hand-drawn Christmas cards to Harris from various people he had worked with. And one in particular, the Johnson House in California, in L.A., the Johnson's son was an artist who drew, among others, Bambi.
Huh.
And I loved that. In fact, when I was just working on the first installation of the book in terms of the catalog, I knocked on his door, knowing he still lived there. He was an old man, and it was a very sort of unnerving situation to knock cold on somebody's door and ask if you could come in and see their house. But I was doing that, and and I heard a person come to the door, and I guess looked at me through the little window, and I was really totally creeped out. But he didn't open the door, so I never met him. But just was delighted by the idea that he had worked on Bambi.
Yeah, evidently, within that particular community, these cartoonists who were working as pioneers for the films that America came to love, particularly during World War II and afterwards, wanted a very relaxing lifestyle that they could come home to from a long day at the studio. And a number of the features are things that sound very normal now, but were quite innovative back then, so the way the space was used. Can you speak to that, Frank? What was the informal lifestyle? How were the houses arranged or put together that was different from the East Coast, say?
Well, Harris played a lot of attention to the way people lived. From the moment you turned off the street, he thought, you ought to feel welcome in this place. And he liked to imagine someone approaching the house, walking through it, taking off his coat. He was very specific about how the spaces in the house would respond to the people using it. He was especially conscious of doing a well-designed kitchen. So to begin with, all of his interior spaces are poems, if you will, about the particular life that he imagined the people living there. He sometimes compared himself to a playwright, and he was staging a play in this building. So that was one aspect that really set him apart. Another was, and within that, he was not constrained by contemporary notions of what a house should be. He was very inventive. And so having made that understanding or analysis of the way people lived, he took account of where they lived and what the views were and where the good winds came from and where the bad winds blew and the course of the sun. And he would design these beautifully crafted spaces accordingly to relate to a particular view or a sunset. He liked to locate bedrooms so that the sun would come into the room in the morning. Almost all of his rooms had windows on 2 and sometimes 3 sides, even the tiniest rooms like the bathrooms. Light was very important to him. The light in California is exceptional. And often his buildings had windows up in the eaves of the roof to allow that to come in. You can walk into almost any house by Harris and you don't need to turn the lights on. You can see each other and read facial expressions really beautifully. So I think it's a response to a number of things, but primarily it would be the way people lived.
It's a very different experience from how many people buy houses today. They walk into a showroom, they pick out a design, they'll start picking their countertops and their oven fixtures and their bathrooms and things like that. But what Harris was doing was a much more highly customized experience. He was designing for the personality of the family as well as the function they wanted to perform, right?
Yes, he liked to think of a house as a portrait of the people who lived there.
And how would he go about painting that portrait with the client?
Well, he liked to visit the places where they lived, while he was designing the house.
So their current home.
Yes, their current home. He was a very empathic person and very observant. You only have to look at his writings and even the way he makes his drawings to see that he's very observant. So I think it was largely intuition. One of his mentors, Richard Neutra, used to have this elaborate questionnaire and even devised a kind of a psychological test for his clients. Psychology was very new and special in California at the time. And Harris didn't do that, but he had firmly held the belief that the house belonged to the people living there, and he was going to make it a portrait of the way they lived.
Has that approach influenced architects since Harris?
Not enough. No.
Not enough?
No.
But you do that with your clients, right?
Oh, yeah. I think it's been, after I met Harris in 1981, he had that particular saying that a house was a portrait and that actually every house, therefore, should be different. Had a big impact on me. I had previously worked for Richard Meyer, where every house was quite beautiful, but was always, in a way, the same. Mm-hmm. It was made of white stuff and glass and had a really big living room. And no matter the situation, where it was in the country or the people living there. And people, in a way, wanted that because they were buying a trophy.
Yeah.
Whereas Harris's approach was very different. You can look at his houses, and they are really quite different. Some are actually made with very thick walls and small windows, but beautiful pergolas. And others are almost entirely glass. And this was because of the way people wanted to live in them.
Lisa, after Harris was very successful in California, particularly in the L.A. area, he put his work into one particularly famous house, the John Weston Havens House in Berkeley, which is still around, I believe. It's owned by the university, right?
It also has a historical marker on it. I think it can't be changed, which is a great thing. Weston Havens was the son of very wealthy San Francisco settlers, and he grew up. He was the only heir to these huge Nob Hill houses that had exquisite antiques and so forth, and he felt suffocated by them. And he wanted a modern house, and he frequently traveled to Germany, and he went to Europe and saw his friends, and then tried to find a modern architect in Europe. And then coming home, he stopped in New York, and there was a show of modern houses, and he saw this little Fellowship Park house where Harwell and his wife Jean lived, which was basically like a pavilion in the woods. In fact, it didn't even have running water for a number of years or electricity. And he was so taken with it that he immediately came home and contacted Harris and took him to a site on this very steep hillside in San Francisco, and one in Berkeley, really looking back at San Francisco, and it took in 3 of the bridges. And so it was just a stunning sight, and it became Harris's masterpiece in some ways.
Everybody driving through that neighborhood would just be struck with it.
No, they couldn't see it.
They couldn't see it?
No,
right.
It's invisible. Virtually invisible.
It's just a garage that you see, and then everything else is perched above the hillside.
You can see it from half a mile away.
Okay.
If you go down into the college campus, you can look back up. But no, on purpose, it was very anonymous. And this was like Harris. He was one of the wealthiest men in San Francisco, and you couldn't recognize his house. It was a long wooden wall, beautifully proportioned, but very quiet. It might have been a fence, for all you knew. And behind it was this extraordinary house, maybe the most beautiful modern house I've ever seen. And Harris himself was like that. He built his own house here in Raleigh on Cox Avenue in the 1960s. And at that time, he was one of the handful of highly thought of residential architects in America. And he designed this very quiet house. It's like a beautiful, unadorned jewel box.
But let me say here that I was recently in Raleigh, and I stayed at the same hotel I stayed in when I was interviewing Harris for the first time, and I couldn't wait to walk across the street sideways. It's the Doubletree Hotel, and I just walked back and forth from our interviews. And so this time I walked over, and it is in terrible disarray. It's like it's been sold a couple of times. He donated it to the university. It's been sold several times, and it is falling apart. All of Harris's beautiful paint choices are crumbling, and the wooden bridge over to it is falling apart, and it's surrounded by trash. I have to just interject that.
Oh.
And the trees, he had these fabulous little trees in the front that were, I don't know what they could. Frank, you would know what was.
They were plane trees. They were pollarded plane trees, like sycamores.
They were so exquisite, and they're just stumps now. Anyways, I thought how fickle the world of the stewards are for works of architecture, because I always imagined that would be where visiting professors to the campus would stay, or anyway. That's just, I have to interject that I was so saddened to see, because it was, when Harwell and Jean were alive, it was so exquisite.
Lisa, how about the Stevenson house?
Ruth Carter Stevenson's house? Yes, it just got totally razed recently.
Oh.
Yes, that's a shame, isn't it? I remember going there with Harmon.
Yeah, and the children just didn't love it the way she did, and they were eager to sell it to the highest bidder, and went for a lot of money, and then it was going to be replaced by English Manor or something. I don't remember.
Your Italianate villa on steroids.
Yeah, really sad.
Now, this was part of Harwell's move from California to Texas, where he took on an academic appointment. And I wonder if you'd share with us the story about Harwell and the Texas Rangers.
That's kind of a loaded question, because there are those who think that, he never really took any credit for the Texas Rangers. In fact, I think it was the furthest thing from his mind. It just so happened that these very interesting artists and architects met there by virtue of his having chosen them. If they weren't already, they became very close in their careers. They weren't there long, but they remained close after their time at the university. Colin Rowe takes credit for having brought a number of them. He always tells me that Harwell had nothing to do with that. But I think Mr. Harris found that interesting that they called themselves the Texas Rangers, but it didn't really mean very much to him.
This was not the Texas Rangers of law enforcement fame. This was a name applied to a group of artists and architects that really sort of took by storm the art scene at that time and revolutionized some of how the subject matter was taught at, which university was he at?
The University of Texas.
Yeah. But he was only there for a few years.
Harwell was not cut out to be an academic in an administrative position. He was far too gentle and sincere to deal with the battleground of academic life. And I'm pretty sure Texas got the best of him, and he was happy to step down as head of the architecture program.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. He inherited a bad situation, and some of the naysayers who were somewhat powerful in the department, made his life miserable. So, yeah, I think the Ruth Carter Stevenson Commission lured him to Fort Worth, and he was glad to be, back at the drawing table.
Well, it's important to say that Harwell did not go to a school of architecture. He did not have a degree. Certainly didn't have an upper-level degree, which most faculty do.
Yes.
And in a way, they looked on him as a bumpkin.
Oh, that's tragic.
Well, it's not the first time that's happened. They did the same thing to Bernard Maybach.
Although some students thought of him as kind of like a movie star, because he was a real designer, not an engineer.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And they had been, people who wanted to be architects had just been stuck in the engineering school.
What was the next step? Where did he go next?
Well, he was in Fort Worth for, I can't remember how many years, just a couple of years, and then he went to Dallas. He designed a really wonderful house. The Eisenberg House in Dallas is just an exquisite Harris house. And he stayed there several years when Trammell Crow, the developer, kind of had him as an in-house designer, but never built very few things that Harris designed for the commercial strip that he had. But he did design the interior, like atrium of a big, massive building that houses the showrooms for various products and so forth.
Didn't they call that the Trade Mart?
The Trade Mart, yeah. And so Mr. designed the interior space there, and he put one of his wonderful little pedal-roofed houses in it. But I think that was a scale that Harris wasn't comfortable with it. I mean, I feel like that little beautiful building inside of this vast space that was not the true Harwell Harris, I think. I think he was most, thrilling when he could have the space as his own and have it be as delicate and zen-like.
By the early 60s, Harwell was ready to leave Texas, and he came to North Carolina, recruited by Henry Camp Hefner to be on the faculty of NC State, and he stayed in that position for the rest of his career. Frank, how did Harwell take to North Carolina?
I never talked to him about that, and in recent years I've looked over things that he wrote while he was here and places that he visited, and except for his clients, to whom he paid a great deal of attention, he was somewhat disconnected from North Carolina. I mean, he doesn't write about the North Carolina landscape or its people, its rivers, with the same passion that he wrote about California. I came to feel that he left his heart in California. He did some wonderful buildings here, don't mistake me.
Yes.
The St. Giles Presbyterian Church is a work of art.
Amazing church.
Which Lisa, by the way, is also suffering from neglect and careless changes.
Oh, no. Sorry to hear that.
But, Lisa, you may think differently about this, but you just don't find him writing in the same passionate way about the people and the life here that he remembered from California.
That's true. I would agree with that. When I arrived there to interview him, he seemed so melancholic, and I felt always that, except for his house, that it was so comfortable to him. He was sort of disconnected, but there were clients there who tapped into his joy at designing, and Kenneth Sugioka reminds me of one, and then he talked then about in other houses we went to while I was there about the pine needles. That's the only thing I think he found those particularly wonderful to design around. But that was pretty much, I agree with you that he seemed disconnected.
I'll have to tell you this funny story about the Sugiokis. 2 years ago, I took a friend there to visit them. Dr. Sugioki died last year, but he was still there. He was in his late 90s, and he and Mrs. Sugioki told us a story about Harwell that he designed the house in such a way that they were not to hang anything on the walls because, he said, the walls are so beautiful, they are like a painting themselves. Well, so they said, well, when he died in 1990, we hung up all our pictures.
Well, that I don't know if that's a common aspect of most architects. I don't think it is of you, but he was very unhappy that Weston Havens, his good friend, who built his house exactly as Harris had designed it, and then he put up an exquisite Japanese screen as you curved up the staircase, and it seemed to work in that space. But Harwell was so unhappy about it, he was just indignant that Weston could have done such a stupid thing.
No discussion of Harwell Harris can really continue for long without mentioning Jean Harris.
Yes, his wife.
Yes, who was a formidable personality, about 10 years older than Harwell, and in many ways his guardian. She carefully reviewed all of his clients and his correspondence. She must have been a marvelous editor because some of Harwell's writings, I think, are the best of the 20th century on architecture. But she had a very sharp tongue, and she probably offended as many clients and drove them away as she helped Harwell to satisfy.
Yeah.
You mentioned kitchens earlier, and she had the opinion, I don't know how much of it was Mr. Harris's, but that a kitchen should only be for one person. she was an amazing good cook. I mean, she had been the food editor for House Beautiful, but in her own meals, there was so much originality and such yummy. And Mr. Harris, for the first night I was there, I mean, there's just the three of us. She made this amazing meal, and she wouldn't let me help her come. She wouldn't even let me pass the threshold into the kitchen. And so she comes out and serves it. Mr. Harris put on a blazer and an ascot.
Ooh.
To carve this little Cornish game hen. It was just so fine and so elegant. I loved that about her. I mean, I watched her standing from my post outside of the kitchen, and how she used this tiny little kitchen to just produce, these wonderful, magical meals.
She would design a meal almost like a piece of architecture. I remember hearing her talk about some people who were coming, and they were important, and mostly they were men, and men liked steaks, and she would design it around that. And I mean, it was she had thought about that meal for a week in advance.
So would a small kitchen be a hallmark of his style in home design?
Oh, I wouldn't say that would be a hallmark. I would say that, like the Havens kitchen, for instance, is just a fabulous room in itself, and not a small kitchen. I mean, it's different types of kitchens, but I tend to not think of them as a hallmark. But I find it interesting that, and I think this has made Harris seem like it's such a transition between the 19th and the 20th century. Like his first house, which only had one bedroom, had a bedroom for a servant. I mean, there were many early houses that had servants' quarters, even though the houses themselves were for young artists, and they were like one bedroom or two bedroom houses with the servants' quarter. And he also called a garage, he called it a motor shed, because people were parking their cars in sheds on their property before they had actual, parking structures that went with the house.
The carport, yes.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that Harwell was a very thoughtful, careful, meticulous architect. In a way, I think of him as the architect's architect. Is that fair, Frank?
No, you're right. Unlike very few architects, one of his good friends and also a great admirer of Harwell was Alvar Aalto, who, like Harwell, paid a great deal of attention to how people lived and where they lived. And, when Aalto came to California on a tour, he made a point of looking up Harris and meeting with him. This was this gorgeous Frank Lloyd Wright house, designed on a hexagonal plan. Gorgeous house.
Yes.
And in it were some Aalto tables and chairs. And so Harris is giving Aalto a tour of California. He takes them up to the Hanna house. Mrs. Hanna opens the door and will not let them in. and
More damn architects to deal with.
No, she didn't care who they were. And Aalto happened to notice that one of his chairs was in the living room, and he said, "Oh, that's a really nice chair. Did you know I designed that?" And she said, "Oh, are you Mr. Aalto?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "You can come in, but not the other man."
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
So Harris
I've
didn't
never
care.
heard that story. Yeah, I can imagine Mr. Harris is always so dapper. I mean, just think about not including Harris. I mean, when he's just standing there in his suit.
I know.
Maybe thought he was a Fuller Brush salesman?
Possibly. I've been to the house. It's a gorgeous house. Another one of my favorite stories Harris told me is that when he was just a youngster in the early 30s, he had sort of gotten a name for himself. And so they invited Frank Lloyd Wright out to give a talk in Los Angeles. And they said, "Well, Mr. Harris, we want you to go to the airport and pick up Mr. Wright." And this was a huge honor at the time.
Okay, yeah.
And Harris thought about it, and at the time he had this old beaten-up Roadster car. It was like a 1922 Ford or something. And the passenger door had a habit of swinging open when you went around a corner turning left. And he thought to himself, "Gosh, how would it be that I pick up Mr. Wright and he's thrown out the door?" on the way home, I'd better
I
not
have
do
heard that
this.
story.
So he declined.
That would be on your Wikipedia page for the end of time.
Well, but it's another way of saying that in the beginning, Gene and Harwell lived a very bohemian life. They hardly had $10 to rub together. As Lisa said, their first house that they lived in for some years, and it didn't have plumbing. And to shower, they would go outside and use a garden hose. And one of them would look at the footpath that went by to make sure no one was coming. And I found this so amazing because I met Harris when he was in his late 70s, and he was the perfect Edwardian gentleman, always wore a suit. And, to imagine that earlier he had this very bohemian life living on a hillside in California, it was really striking.
Well, the bohemian culture at the time of Neutra and Schindler were doing some co-living arrangements together with their wives, and the artists and sculptors and fine artists of the area would hang out together. Wasn't Harris involved in the Schindler house on the beach, the one that was in L.A. Confidential? That
was a Neutra house.
Oh, the Lovell house.
That's the Lovell Health House.
Yeah.
Dr. Lovell was a famous health protagonist in California.
For those of you that haven't heard of Lovell, think Dr. Phil or Dr. Oz today.
Of health.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Mr. Harris worked on the drawings and just for free in Neutra's studio on the trunk, apparently, as his drafting table. But he didn't play a part in the design.
But he was there as far as the construction of it was. So I think we have some photos of him.
Yeah, that's true.
Lisa, first a comment, then a question. I grew up in a modernist house, and my mom put it not quite so genteelly as you did about our small kitchen in a modernist house. She would shoo us out of the kitchen, and she would say, "It's a one-butt kitchen."
Oh,
so
that doesn't sound like Miss Harris either. But that gets to the essence of the idea. I mean, there's something to be said for that. I had a galley kitchen for a long time, and it was worked that way, and it was very efficient for the cook and not very friendly to others.
My question is, who are you going to write about next?
I'm proposing a book on the architect, the North Carolina architect, Harry Wolff. So I'm reaching out to publishers for that.
So all publishers, if you're listening, get in contact with Lisa. Because she wrote a fabulous book on Harwell Harris, and we'd love to hear more from you.
Oh, thank you. It was a real pleasure. Mr. Harris opened himself to me and really gave me this extraordinary experience.
Here's what I'd like to say about Lisa's book on Harwell Harris. First of all, she didn't write it as an architect because she's not one, so it's free of the usual jargon and theories that often occur in books on architects and architecture. Secondly, she's a very good writer. And thirdly, she really tells the story of Harwell's life and his place in America at the time that's invaluable to anyone who wants to think about architecture or how buildings are designed, regardless of the time, because it's such a clear expression of a creative process and the response of a creative person to his environment. I've read Lisa's books probably 10 times over, and I always find something new in it. And what impresses me in the end is the clarity and the lucidity of her prose. It's just like drinking water.
Oh, Frank, that's so nice.
Wow.
But it's very meaningful to me coming from you.
Well, I'm not the only one who's read that book many times.
And it's still doing really well on Amazon.
The really sad thing about the book is that I finished it, and I sent it to Mr. Harris, and he was, I wrote him, Harwell, I said, it must be the most presumptuous thing in the world to send somebody a story of their life. And, and he wrote back. He said, maybe there are some things that, had you been there, you would have had a different take on. But on the other hand, the distance you have makes me see them in a new way, and maybe it's more accurate from the way you're seeing it than it is the way I would have seen it, because I was too close. And otherwise, he didn't say, I don't even know what those things were, but he was very happy happy with the book, but it didn't get published by the time he died.
Huh.
And when I went out there to speak at the memorial service, which Frank invited me to, he put me up in Harwell's studio, this wonderful studio, and I was in his very room, and the only thing on the bookshelf was my book in manuscript form.
Oh.
And it was very touching because you know how sometimes people put a ruler underneath titles or things. He had put a ruler under the title of the book and made a line under it. And I, for the first time, free to kind of really roam through his house. And I was always aware that there was a closet. If you pulled all of his Brooks Brothers suits to one side, there was a little door from his room, the closet in his room, to a studio where there were fireproof filing cabinets and a drawing table and so forth, and all the files that Gene had meticulously organized. And I was really able to see, find things that became included in the book that he, in his sort of reduced state of, and toward the end of his life, he couldn't find. And it was very rich to see how the way he designed things on this module had influenced the very last days of his life. I mean, he got comfort from moving through the house in this way that this 3-foot module had anticipated. It was quite wonderful.
Lisa, Frank, thank you very much for joining us today and talking about Harwell and his work. We really enjoyed having you with us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
You've been listening to an encore presentation of U.S. Modernist Radio, underwritten by Diane Bald and the Bubman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for the show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. That's BOBBIE at usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Listen to any of our over 400 shows at usmodernist.libsyn.com, with Libsyn spelled Libsyn.